Can you guys see my slides? Let's see. I'm seeing chat.
Yep.
Yes, great, awesome, thank you. So welcome to DC207, now in cyberspace. It is so nice to see you all in the ether today. I really didn't want to cancel this event, but so we decided to take it online. So we'll give this a shot and see how it works. If you guys have any feedback about what's working and doesn't work, feel free to let me know. If we have some new folks here today, if you don't know who I am, my name is Ben Allen. I am the point of contact and organizer for DC207. I also do a whole bunch of different little things for the group. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what we're doing tonight. I don't know why it says Jim Troutman ? I think I put your whole talk there and I cut it out, so sorry about that. So I'm going to give a quick update of DC207. I'm going to talk about the prize that we're raffling off. We're going to give Jim the floor. He's going to share his really awesome talk with us tonight. And then we're going to give away the things and quick edit the ? I can't do that. Everyone notices. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about the next event, which is the Capture the Flag in April. So for folks who do not know what DC207 is, DC207 is Maine's DEF CON chapter. I always have to put this slide in there. The reason we started DC207 is because there wasn't really anything like this in Maine at the time, and InfoSec is cool, so let's talk about it, right? We try to make these really interactive, great presenters, local content. We do workshops, we do Capture the Flags. We're super inclusive and welcoming. We think, well, at least the mission statement here is that, the thing about information security is that it feels sort of inaccessible to some folks sometimes, right? And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that everyone is welcome, and we want to help people join us because this is really cool stuff. Again, our pledge is 100% awesome community curated content, no corporate sales BS. I'm never going to put a sales rep in front of you to sell something, right? We meet every second Thursday of the month, and that's it. So quick update. As far as funding, I just want to be a little transparent about this. I wanted to say thank you so much for your donations over the last meeting that we've received, and any sort of swag orders that we've gotten from our online store. Thanks to your help, we are actually 18% towards our goal in funding the DC207 scholarship this fall. That's where we're going to give out some money to a student who needs it. And we're hoping to start taking applications this summer. Some of you may know that I am trying to turn DC207 to a nonprofit, but we can't really do that due to what our legal counsel says. So there's really going to be no changes to the group. I will be working on spinning up a nonprofit organization, and one of the things that they'll do is they'll primarily fund DC207, and it'll be super corporate friendly. One of the things that people don't really like, at least my corporate partners that I talk to them, they don't want to necessarily be associated with DC207 because we've got like a bad vibe or something. So anyways, so if you have any questions about that, let me know. So tonight's prize, everybody who signed up, you're in the raffle. We're giving away a Proxmark 3 kit. It's open source hardware and software. It's going to allow you to read and clone high frequency and low frequency RFID devices. Super cool device, and if you've never played with RFID before, you definitely want to check this out. Since it's virtual, what I ask from the winner is just send me your email address. Send me your physical address, and I'll pop this in the mail for you tomorrow morning. If you miss out on this and you want to pick one up, they're over at the DC Swag Shop. And again, as always, with anything that we do offer here, this is going directly to the scholarship we're launching. So our event tonight, Jim, I hope this is okay. I use this picture. Hopefully. It was on Twitter. So Jim Troutman, follow him on Twitter, guys. He's really awesome. The content he's putting out there is really cool. He describes himself as a consultant, InfoSec guy, an ex-ISP owner. I totally want to hear about that. He's also the co-founder of NEPF and the Northern New England Neutral Internet Exchange. He's the director of operations for SkyTalks, and I'm a huge fan of SkyTalks, so I'm really happy to have him here. And also, you're involved with B-Sides as well, Jim, right? You still there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also involved in B-Sides DC. I think this will be my 4th year.
Wow.
With B-Sides DC, and even though I live nowhere near DC, I am one of the B-Sides DC organizers.
Well, that's very cool. Very cool. So he's going to be sharing his talk tonight from ShmooCon 2020. It's all about the DNS New World Order. So I'm done. This is the end of my blabbing. Thanks for humoring me. I'm going to go ahead and kick this over to Jim, and you can share, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, good evening. Thanks all you guys for showing up for this virtual event. So this is a presentation that I gave at ShmooCon in January as part of the Fire Talks competition. And I was quite shocked and surprised to win that competition, get first prize. Fire Talks, they're designed to be 20-minute talks. So this slide deck is like 40 slides for 20 minutes. So I may go a little bit slower than the Fire Talk speed. And then we're going to take some questions at the end, and hopefully I don't confuse you too much. So thank you, Ben, for the introduction. I'm a cranky old guy on the internet. I've been doing things for a long time. I'm one of the only people that I know that actually started out on a paper TTY with a 300 baud acoustic coupler. I know a few other people that have. We're all old and cranky. So I've been on the internet since '87, so that makes me like positively prehistoric. And also I've been doing internet infrastructure off and on since the 90s. Yes, I have worked at ISPs, I've started ISPs, I've bought ISPs. I was business partners in a CLEC at one point. I worked for cable TV companies, multiple ones. I've done web hosting work. I've done a lot of things. I'm kind of easily bored. So now I consult because I'm a terrible employee. So just a disclaimer, one of the organizations that I talk about here in this presentation is Quad9, and the Internet Exchange that I help run, which is a nonprofit here in Maine for Northern New England, NENIX. We host some servers for Quad9, and I've had business dealings with them and talked to them, and I think they're all fine people, honestly, but I just needed to disclaim that I know those folks. It didn't really affect my, my content that much. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about DNS and all the different new ways of doing DNS that you may have heard of. We're going to talk about operational things about why you should be monitoring DNS. We're going to talk about all these new cloud services that are giving us all these easy to remember DNS servers and why they are so magnanimous to give this gift to the world of all of these amazing cloud service DNS. We're going to talk a bit about privacy and web browser product decisions, and particularly their bad product decisions. And at the end, I'm going to give you some recommendations to mitigate the impact of all this new DNS stuff, both for your corporate networks as well as your home networks, if you're the kind of geek that might attend a DEF CON group meetup and maybe run some things at home. So this is the joke. This has been a joke for a while. It's always DNS. And there is some truth to this, but the reality is DNS is actually incredibly reliable. The problem is that it's so reliable that you guys don't touch it, and when you or your system administrators, and when they do touch it, they break it because it's been so long since the last time you touched it, you have no idea what you're doing. So it's not that DNS is fundamentally broken. It's not that DNS is not resilient and reliable. It's the humans. It's always the humans. We break things. So we'll talk about DNS. So it was created way, way back in 1983. It actually predates me on the internet. A couple of different RFCs. 1987 for the last major update. DNS is really the last major plain text protocol on the internet. I would also say the last useful one. DNS, and we'll get into how it's scaled and so forth. For those of you that don't know, DNS is the service that converts names into numbers, because that's how the internet works at the IP layer. Everything is based on connections to numbers, not names. But humans are really, really bad at remembering numbers. So we have to have a service, because we're not so bad at remembering names most of the time. And yeah, some people used to be pretty good at remembering IPv4 addresses, but today in the world of IPv6, those numbers just break everybody's brain, and nobody should be trying to remember these numbers anymore. So that's why we have DNS. It is the service that converts names into numbers, so your computer, your phone, whatever it is, makes connections and gets things done for you. So DNS is really boring, like really boring. Most people don't even think about it because it's boring and it's reliable and it works, and it's just kind of plumbing. Like most of the time, unless your plumbing has a problem, you don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about the plumbing in your house or in your business, because it just works. So give you a little background on DNS. So there's 13 root servers that make up the DNS. They're lettered A through M. They're operated by 12 different organizations. There is one organization that runs 2 sets of servers. These are not individual servers. Some people think they are. And there was a point in time in which they were literally individual boxes, but that was decades ago. So these are clusters of servers with load balancers and all sorts of fancy scale out technologies, including a lot of BGP Anycast going on. So some of these root servers have 160 separate physical instances around the world, and each one of those instances could be dozens or even hundreds of physical servers. So this has allowed the scaling of traffic volumes, increased resiliency and redundancy, especially against directed attacks, because these root servers appear physically all over the world. So DDoS is against them, and they do get DDoSed constantly. They can be soaked up on a local basis. So every root server out there is getting double-digit billions of queries per day, billions. And overall, they're answering trillions of queries per month. DNS has scaled over 9 orders of magnitude in 35 years, and it will continue to do so. The other thing I want to make sure to point out about DNS is that the protocol has not fundamentally changed. There's been some changes and some additions and different tweaks here and there, but you could literally take a DNS server from 1987 spec, and at least for authoritative queries, it will answer most of them. There are some things it wouldn't understand, like it wouldn't do TXT records or SRV records and things like that, but those have been later additions. But if you need to convert a name into a number, a 1987 piece of software will work just fine, which is really pretty amazing for most things on the internet. So I mentioned IP Anycasting. So what is that? That is a technique where using BGP, the same IP address is advertised in multiple physical locations all over the internet, and decisions based on where that is the best path is based on BGP path selection, which generally means the closest in terms of what they call AS distance, autonomous system distance, has nothing to do with actual performance, speed, or quality. That's one of the problems with BGP, but that's another talk. So Anycasting is widely used throughout the internet for a lot of things, especially DNS and the DNS cloud providers. So it allows you to do massively distributed services all over the globe. So let's talk about original DNS. And this is what some people are now calling DO53. So I mentioned before, those RFCs, 882 and 1034. It is a plain text protocol. It uses UDP port 53 for queries, TCP port 53 for zone file transfers, if you need to do that for secondaries. And again, it's been largely the same since 1985. So since this is virtual, I can't actually see the room and ask you all, how many of you are blue teamers and how many of you are paying attention to your DNS logs and looking at them. The wonderful thing about DNS is because it's plain text, you can run it through Wireshark, you can run it through a lot of different tools, and you can monitor that traffic. DNS is really the best way, I think, particularly in bang for the buck, for finding malware on your endpoints. I think it's just absolutely essential. And if you're a blue team person trying to defend particularly a corporate environment, you should be monitoring the DNS traffic from your endpoints.
You've got a few.
Okay.
You've got a few
Excellent.
indicating.
And if you are a blue team person and you are not monitoring DNS, you want to start monitoring DNS. It is absolutely awesome, easy to do, and you will learn so many things about what your endpoints are up to, and it will scare you. And then you will change something.
Much more harsh at ShmooCon when you said that line.
I may have been. You're doing it wrong. I think that's what I said. All right, so now let's talk about some of the other DNS things that are out there. I am specifically not talking about DNSSEC. And people said, well, why didn't you talk about DNSSEC? Well, because that's on the authoritative side. I'm really talking about resolver stuff, client-facing stuff. So DNS crypt was a new way of doing DNS. It didn't go through the IETF RFC process. There was no RFC. It was DNS over port 443, but not TLS. It works. It actually works. It solved a lot of problems. It just really didn't get a lot of traction. It wasn't exciting. Partly the reason maybe it didn't get traction was because of the people that were behind it. DJB, if anybody knows who that is, you may know what I'm talking about. He's brilliant, but doesn't always get along well with others. So now we'll talk about DNS over TLS. So in response to some of the revelations from the Snowden leaks and other information that has come to light in the last 10 years or so, a lot of people began to realize that all this DNS traffic was being monitored, particularly by governments and also by ISPs and so forth. So a lot of people thought, well, we've got to do something about this, and we need to encrypt that traffic. So they came up with, through the IETF, through an RFC process, a couple of RFCs, to create an encryption extension. So it uses TCP port 853 with TLS encryption, just like HTTPS. And it's supported now by Android 9 or higher for the whole OS. And if your DNS server that you have on your Android device supports DoT, it will just enable it. It'll figure it out and enable it. And then all your queries from your Android device are now encrypted point to point between you and the server. Great, awesome. And Android does have a whole lot of installed base, but they're basically the only OS. Yep. Now Microsoft has said, I think it was September, maybe it was October, they said, we will support DoT at the Windows OS layer soon. Yeah, I don't know what that means. And, and yes, there are some other Linux-based OSs that, you can enable DoT or, for the whole OS. But in terms of like end user, unfortunately, Linux on the desktop I hear this is the year of Linux on the desktop. Maybe next year is also the year of Linux on the desktop. But they also said that, I think, in 2002. Anyway, so DoT didn't get a lot of adoption, mostly because the operating systems, the widely used operating systems, just haven't used it. They haven't adopted it because, again, DNS is boring. It's not broke. Why do we have to fix it? Why do we need to put engineering resources on something that works perfectly fine? So some other folks that were upset with the lack of progress on DoT, and for other reasons, said we need to do DNS over HTTPS called DoH. So there was a different RFC process, 8484, and this uses TCP port 443 with TLS encryption. And basically it's a special query with an HTTP GET with JSON responses. So is there anything else out there in the world that uses port 443 with TLS encryption? Oh, wait, yes, HTTPS. Performance-wise, DoH can be several milliseconds slower than regular unencrypted DNS. Not really enough to matter in reality, but anyway. So one of the big reasons behind DoH was that it can't be blocked. Because everybody, there's this new world in which a lot of application developers, the big guys, Google's and Facebook and others, they just want to turn the whole internet into a dumb pipe. And kind of the whole world, they believe, HTTPS is the new TCP, is what some people have said. So that's one of the reasons that they wanted to do DoH. So now we have DNS in the cloud. So for a lot of years, there were ISPs that offered public DNS servers. 4.2.2.2, a lot of people remember that. Comcast, 75, 75, 75, 75, that's a newer one. There's lots of others. It was just a thing that was operated as a public resource. Unless you were like a network engineer, you probably didn't even know they existed. Great. Well, way back, it's been over 10 years now. Yeah, Google launched their Quad8 service in December 2009. And their official point of view was that, hey, there's a lot of ISPs that have broken DNS. We've got problems with user experience. We've got problems with broken ISP DNS where they keep a cached record forever, even though it's not supposed to. And they wanted to improve the speed of the internet because, of course, for Google, they sell a lot of ads. And the more ads they can give you, the more money they can make. And they want you to have a good experience browsing websites and consuming all those ads. So that's why they created this service. And it was also useful to work around censorship issues at the time. So one of the things that bears repeating is that if you control the DNS, you can control where people go or don't go. And there's a lot of content filtering in the world that is based entirely around DNS. Now, these days, in a lot of, let's say, less free countries or oppressive regimes, the censorship and the control of the internet is getting pretty good and pretty hard to work around, like China with the Great Wall. But back, 10 years ago, a lot of that censorship was really just DNS based, so it was easy to circumvent. So all the old people watching this presentation, you may remember this picture or others similar to it. This was Arab Spring. And at the time, changing your DNS server to Google was an actual win and did allow a lot of people to get information that otherwise their government did not want them to have. These days, not so much, but back then it was a win. So now there's a whole lot of other DNS in the cloud providers. You've got Cloudflare, Quad1, Quad9 folks, Packet Clearinghouse, and then you have others, some of which have been around a lot longer, like OpenDNS, which is now purchased by Cisco Umbrella. So it's important to remember, again, that DNS is really great for tracking. If you can monitor DNS queries, you know where everyone goes and what they do online. So this is absolutely great for you in your corporate world with your endpoints or your house at home. Maybe you've got teenagers, maybe you want to know where they're going on the internet, or maybe you want to have some control over them. That's fine. That's your network. You should be able to do that. So DNS queries, if you can see them, you know where people are going for shopping, entertainment, work, medical sites, etc. All of that is exposed. So again, if you control the DNS, you control where users go or don't go. Again, it is great for monitoring and fighting malware and intrusions in a corporate environment or even your home environment. I say once again, it is essential for blue team network defense. You should be doing it. But here's the other thing that isn't often talked about. DNS is getting monetized and has been getting monetized for years. I would say that many, probably most large ISPs, cable operators, telcos, etc., they've been selling your DNS information for years to advertising and tracking companies, to multiple companies. And some of them actually can tie it directly to you at your house. They can say that it's, they can link it to your account information by name. And of course, these companies correlate all that based on your demographics. Some companies like Verizon with their mobile, if you do not explicitly disable it, they have essentially a super cookie that gets inserted on all of your HTTP headers that allows advertisers and anybody running web properties to track you all across the internet. So they're making money. I've seen different revenue estimates in the vicinity of $3 to $5 a year per user. There's absolutely large ISPs with hundreds of thousands or millions of customers, and so that becomes real money, and that's one of the reasons they want to monetize it. So because of this monetization and privacy invasion, that's one of the reasons behind different web browser vendors pushing DoH. I think in part because the operating systems have lagged behind. So Firefox, they started initial support for DoH in Firefox 62. Firefox 72, they actually made it an option in network settings. And they have enabled this in the USA. It is now active, I believe, as of February 25th was the day that they turned it on. And it is opt-out. It is not opt-in. They just turned it on and you get a little pop-up that says, hey, I just changed everything. You cool with that? And most people are just like, yeah, whatever. And they click the button. They were not able to do this in GDPR land. So Mozilla picked Cloudflare as their first and default DoH provider. And yeah, they put together a contract and some requirements, and supposedly there's no money changing hands and there's privacy and so forth and so on. And to the extent that that contract can be honored, that's probably true. Mozilla did set up a DNS canary feature, a domain name canary. So there's a particular name that can be set up in DNS that's not going to appear in the general internet DNS. So your ISP can disable DoH so they can continue to monetize you by monitoring your traffic. And some ISPs are doing this unless you override. So there's another company now. This is actually active. NextDNS.io is the other DoH option. And again, there's a contract, whatever, if you believe them. Chrome supports DoH, but it's not enabled by default. And in fact, Chrome is supposed to have a GPO that will allow you to disable it entirely if you're in a corporate environment, which I think is great. Microsoft Chromium, Edge does support DoH. Opera supports it, again, not enabled by default. So great. So we have all these DoH providers and these DNS in the cloud providers. So you don't pay for any of that. And we know the golden rule of the internet is if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So that's the monetization I talked about. It's also surveillance. This DNS in the cloud, not all these cloud providers have very clear privacy policies, and I've read a bunch of them. The data retention, depending on what it is 24 hours to 2 years, if they actually spell it out at all. They're keeping aggregate data trends, that I'm less concerned about. But what I'm really concerned about is that a lot of people think that DoH is this magical solution that's going to make everybody way more secure, particularly in oppressive regime countries where your DNS traffic is going to be secure. Well, that's really not the case. And people that I've been following for years and using their software for decades and respect them, like Paul Vixie and Bert Hubert, Power DNS, these people have been banging the drum for the last year about these issues, and that DoH is not anywhere near as secure as everybody thinks it is, and it really just takes control away from the local network operator, whether that's you in your house or you in your corporate environment. Bert says it best right here in this little tweet. You know, DoH, yeah, it encrypts the queries and the responses across the wire. However, you're still going to have SNI, the IP address of the server, OSCP for your certificate checking. All of that's, by the way, in clear text right now. So yeah, your DNS query itself was protected, but anybody actually looking at your traffic who is in line in your traffic, they are able to inspect your data and understand where you're going, if they so choose to. And many of these network operators do choose to. DA667, he also said, you know, DoH doesn't really do what people think you are. And he talks about consolidating trust with confidential data. And that is the problem. Here's another thing that's a real problem that I did not understand at all until I started doing the research for this talk. TLS session resumption tickets. So all of these DoH requests, as well as this can be done on the HTTPS side, setting up a new encryption session takes a little bit of compute time. It takes about 20 milliseconds worth of compute power to set up a TLS session. And that doesn't sound like much unless you are operating servers that have millions of clients, and then that becomes significant. So there's a way to basically do your encryption setup and then resume it later, so it doesn't take all that additional crypto setup time. Great, awesome. However, that is now a session key that can be used to uniquely identify you everywhere you go on the internet. And this can be done with DoH as well as regular HTTPS sessions. So what does that mean? That means that you can start off at your house on your phone in the morning on your Wi-Fi, and you use some things on the internet, and then you leave your house and you go out on 4G in the world, and you do something else on the internet, and then you go to your office and you do other things, you go to the coffee shop, you go someplace else, and throughout the entire day, your TLS sessions are being resumed. And that is a unique identifier that allows them to tie location-specific data to you, so they know where you work, they know which coffee shop you visited, et cetera, and they can tie all of that browsing back to you, even without any cookies. So that's a new one. That's a real serious issue. I have read some things that both Google and Facebook have been using this for tracking, you know, beyond the fact that you are logging into their sites, but you know, that's really a concern. Here's another concern. So all of these DNS in the cloud providers, they're all USA based, they're USA corporations, even if globally distributed infrastructure. So they are subject to national security letters, FISA 702, and other laws. So that means that they can be ordered to turn over information about your DNS queries, and they don't have to tell anyone. In fact, they're prohibited from telling anyone. And the fact that we are now, organizations like Mozilla with Firefox are concentrating millions of users' DNS queries into one cloud provider, makes it a very convenient place for governments and law enforcement of all types, not just in the US, to be able to serve them with warrants or do other things to start capturing that data. And this does not get enough attention. Folks in Europe with GDPR, they're very up in arms about this, which is why Firefox, in fact, cannot enable DoH by default in GDPR land because it would violate GDPR. So again, he who controls the DNS controls everything. So, and I think this is entirely appropriate. If you own the network, whether it's your house or your corporation, you should be able to control the horizontal and the vertical. There are many legit, reasonable things about controlling traffic on your network. Those of you with kids at home, maybe you want to have some content controls. Maybe you have to have the ability to turn off YouTube or to turn off Netflix at certain hours of the day. Because teenagers basically don't do anything if they can still play games and so forth. And it's certainly in a corporate environment. You may not like it, but guess what? Your employer may not actually want you to go to Facebook while you're at the office. Really, I mean, it's kind of shocking, but maybe you shouldn't be able to go to Facebook, or maybe you shouldn't be able to watch Netflix at your desk. Maybe. I mean, that's between you and your employer. So DNS is a good way to control these things. So here's some recommendations for both you at home as well as in a corporate environment. So number one recommendation always is you need to run your own internal recursive DNS server that is always going to be the highest performance available to you. Haven't really talked about the fact that all of these cloud services, they're all a distance away from you. On a good day, they're maybe going to be 10 milliseconds, probably 30 or 40 milliseconds away from you. The server on your internal network, 1 millisecond, probably less. So that's going to be just better from a performance point of view because all those little extra milliseconds add up when you're doing page queries and doing web browsing. Also, of course, a lot of corporate environments, you've got internal DNS. You've got .corp or .home or whatever. You may have internal DNS inside your organization. By having something like Firefox suddenly start using DoH outside your organization, people are going like, hey, how come I can't connect to the wiki internally on our corporate network anymore? How come I can't connect to SharePoint anymore? Oh, well, that's because that DNS server has no view of your internal DNS because you've been forced outside. So you definitely want to run internal recursive DNS. You probably want to implement the canary domain to block the auto enablement of DoH by Firefox. And if you have an internal DNS, this is where your logging and monitoring goes. That is absolutely where you should do all of your logging and monitoring for blue team defense purposes. It's absolutely the best way to do it, and it's a low-cost way of doing it. You don't need to have a bunch of taps. You don't need to have other infrastructure. This will scale very well for most organizations. On your firewall, you want to go ahead and block all outbound UDP and TCP port 53 for all your endpoints, because they can't even talk to Quad 8 or Quad 9 or anybody else. This will have the effect of helping force your endpoints to use internal DNS. You can block DoT easily. It's a whole separate protocol, TCP 853. So go ahead and do that. You want to have endpoint configuration standards that disables DoH in all your browsers, because you do have endpoint configuration standards, right? In your corporate environment, you're supposed to have them. I think NIST has a few things to say about this. You want to point all of your endpoints to your internal DNS servers, however you need to do that. DHCP, GPOs, static configs, registry keys, etc. All of these ways, it all goes into your endpoint configuration standard. You can also then, on your internal DNS, use DNS crypt to make your internal DNS talk to the outside world. So it's not actually talking to the root servers directly. This will encrypt your DNS lookups to a public DNS crypt server. And there are many of them running in GDPR countries. This will also have the effect that if you pick a server that has enough traffic, maybe it has tens of thousands of customers or users or hundreds of thousands, you get a bit of a privacy mixer herd protection for your queries. It'll be harder for folks monitoring the traffic coming from those servers to know exactly who was sending these queries. So that's a benefit if you're trying to keep your data private. The other recommendation is you really want to look at IP network capture of all of these well-known addresses inside your network. In addition to just blocking them on the edge, you should make your internal servers respond to these addresses and have these addresses routed internally to your own server. And you will find many interesting things. Like a lot of IoT devices use hard-coded DNS that cannot be changed. Google Chromecast will always use Quad 8. Even if you hand it DHCP options that tell it to use another DNS server, it's going to ignore those and it's going to use Quad 8. So in reality, a lot of ISPs and particularly hospitality networks have been doing this for years. You just didn't notice. So a lot of times when you think you're actually talking to Quad 8 at a hotel or something like that, you're not. You're talking to some man in the middle box on their network because they want to control the DNS because they're probably doing a captive portal, and that's one of the things that they do. So really you should do this on your own network. So remember, it's always DNS, always. And that is the presentation. I do have the slide deck available. I have a number of bibliographic entries, 4 pages worth. I do want to point out that Paul Vixie and Bert Hubert both have a number of talks available on YouTube, as well as some thoughtful papers out there. And if this is stuff you're interested in, their presentations and their papers are way more informative than my little talk. All right.
Can I offer an alternate solution to DNS privacy for an individual?
Yes. We're going to allow Bob here, and maybe I should introduce you.
No.
No. Okay. This is my friend Bob. He knows some things.
All right. So, so full disclosure, I am Bob Rudis, harbor master on the internet, Captain America Shield. If you're on Twitter or anywhere else and you are crazy enough to follow me or recognize me, I work right now at Rapid7. I'm chief data scientist, which means I just get to play all day and I don't have a real job. And used to run the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report for a while, and then used to have real jobs like all the rest of you do. And I just, oh no, no. And I'm old. Okay, so I don't normally have to disclose old. So anyway, I do a lot of tracking of DoH and DoT and this whole mess that the do-gooders of the internet, that I like to call them, do. So I can do a whole separate thing on this at some time, but what Jim suggested is totally valid. If you can do that, definitely do that. Great. It's a little bit technical. DNS crypt does present some challenges for folks. Certificates are fun. Everything is kind of fun. And forgetting your corporate environment for a second, all of the stuff that Jim just talked about is super important for your corporate environment. I will be even more vociferous and deliberate than Jim was. And if you're not looking at DNS traffic, you're incompetent. I'm sorry,
You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it completely wrong.
Yeah.
It is the biggest, the most valuable data source that you generate internally and that you have for your defense of your organization. So if you're not doing this stuff with DNS, you just aren't doing defense. Secondarily, as an individual, for your own personal security or home security, if you go to Google, and search for get DNS, because I forget I think it's getdns.org, but you can just go to Google, search get DNS, all one word, no spaces. Go there, grab their stubby resolver and load it on your personal laptops. I don't think they have it for Android or anything. So just like on your personal devices, your personal computers. And then OVH has it's like one of the world's worst ISPs. There's all sorts of bad guys there, but they've got $2.50 servers a month. and they're not inside the US and they're not subject to the US stuff that Jim was talking about, and set up 2 of them for, yes, that's $5 a month. I think everyone can probably afford $5 a month. And use Nginx, because Nginx has a dirt simple configuration for normal DNS, DoH, and DoT all at the same time without having to do anything but get a horrible, evil Let's Encrypt certificate to put onto there, because you should do that because it's free and they killed SSL, so it doesn't matter. And if you do all that, it's really simple. I can write stuff up. I can send stuff to your way, Jim, or you guys can send stuff out to these guys. It's really simple to set up. It's security everywhere for you then, because it's literally encrypted from your laptop, no matter where you are, to servers you control. And then you can do forwarding from those servers to the servers Jim was talking about that are in GDPR land. They take a lot of people that are on there, so that you're really getting the herd immunity as well as the security that you have on there. It's a really simple, I know it sounds complex, but it's really simple and really straightforward. For folks that are in organizations as well, I'm co-runner of Project Sonar at Rapid7. I measure the adoption of, I measure the spread of DoT and DoH on the internet. I just started measuring DoH. We figured out a way to do it. Anyway, so if you ever want lists, hit us up. We're probably going to start generating lists internally for our own customers, but I can give lists to whoever I darn well please. So I'll probably make a GitHub repo to put them out there anyway. But if you want to know where DoH and DoT servers are being stood up on the internet, definitely do that. And just as an aside for next DNS, because I used to think they were going to be okay, they're not using Anycast. So they actually stood up 1,000 distinct, I mean, they've got, all these guys have thousands of servers anyway, but they set up 1,000 distinct servers with 1,000 distinct IP addresses all over the place. And that's doing it wrong.
Terrible.
Yes. So while I would normally say like maybe go to them, you really can't trust any of these folks. And then the final, like I've got more soapbox stuff, but the final one I'll say to give other people a chance to type. So I hate Cloudflare. So just I don't know them personally. I don't know of anything they've done evil except for the fact that they support lots of horrible people on their platform. But do you really want to give via Firefox, especially, all your web requests, because they kind of own the internet. They've actually surpassed Akamai in the number of things that sit behind them. Sorry, Andy. And we both know Andy, who was a part of the CISO there. And they now get all your DNS requests as well too. And it's a DoH session, so they get all of the extended TLS session tracking on you. So, like, you've just given them you, and they have not earned your trust. They have not given you any reason to earn their trust, and they're 33% owned by Google. So you do the math. So anyway, I'm off. Unless anyone has other questions, I'm off my soapbox. I'll be glad to give more resources. I'll shoot them your way if you want them, or but yeah, I just wanted to say, like, there are ways to help protect yourself and do kind of more stuff as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob, for that extra information. Informative as usual, because he actually gets to do this stuff for his day job. I'm just like a tinkerer. I haven't. I have some clients that are ISPs and CLECs and things, but I haven't owned an organization where this was like part of my day to day in 10, 12 years. So, but I still get to touch it, and I still get to have these conversations. And fortunately, none of the orgs I deal with are monetizing their customers.
What tools or signatures are out there to detect DoH traffic?
Unless you want to,
go ahead.
Yeah. So there are. So I will first direct you to go to. I usually don't tell people to go to SANS.org, but I'll tell you to go to SANS.org. And on the IC blog about 5 weeks ago, there was, I don't have to slow down. These people talk fast all the time. So about 5 weeks ago, they had a great post. They dug into 2 different blog posts about taking a look at, hey, what does it look like in a DoH session? And there's some really well-defined characteristics for the number of packets, the size of packets, the duration of the actual session. And you can use those if you've got access to that level of data in your network. So that does require some level of access to network traffic analysis to do that. Once you have that, though, you will be able to profile that, identify the IP endpoints that are doing that, and they generally don't change the IP address of the endpoints for these things. And then kind of have it go from there. Oh, speaking of IP address of endpoints, the insidious part of all this is there's DoH and DoT running on IPv6, which we will be tracking in 2 months. Which means you can't just look for your IPv4 traffic looking at DoH, because you're probably also letting IPv6 to the internet, even though you don't think you are. So you also have to worry about this on IPv6, and I've I suspect Firefox is going to start prioritizing DoH over IPv6 over that, so they can bypass all the people that are trying to restrict things, because the do-gooders seem to be more evil than not evil these days.
Yes.
AN asks, what about queue name minimization? Is it useful?
Yes. This is really eDNS client subnet. Yeah, I mean, everybody's supposed to have that enabled. Getting a little bit into the technical specifics. So it used to be many years ago that when you did DNS queries and you were, say, a content provider like, say, Akamai, they could figure out where to steer you geographically based on where your queries were coming from. But when everybody started using these centralized servers like, say, Quad8, they were just getting queries from Google and they had really no idea where the clients were. So that might mean undesirable things like you are in London and you are being steered to a server in San Francisco. So they came up with an extension, eDNS client subnet, and it's supposed to only present the upper bits of the address, not the client specific address, but say just the subnet that you're on, to the server so that they can try to steer based on some geolocation stuff. And that's all great, although that is definitely more information being leaked than a lot of people would like. And that works pretty well, but there's a lot of broken implementations. And I've heard from root server operators that they just get tons of queries all day long with the complete client IP in them, not just the subnet only. So that's how a lot of that content steering works. Let's see.
I got the next one.
Go ahead.
Ben asks, how do I explain DoT to my non-technical privacy attorney in a way which helps them understand the impact in privacy?
So in a non-technical way, I would say tell them DoH only hides a portion of the information. It's essentially like, so before with DNS, you could say it was like a postcard in the mail. Your postman or anyone else handling the item, they could read both sides of it. They could see all the information. So now with DoH, maybe it's inside of an envelope. So they can't see the contents, but they still know where it was mailed from and what the return address is and where it's going. So they can still they can see the metadata of like, hey, you are receiving mail from this catalog company, or maybe you sent a check to this catalog company. They can't actually see the contents because it's inside an envelope, but they can tell a lot just from that. And because that information is not encrypted, the additional information, the SNI, the OSCP checking, plus the IP address of the website itself, it's really not really helping you with privacy. So, you know, for a non-technical person, it's really just like, well, we protected one thing out of, say, 4 things that help identify that session. But unfortunately, because we have the other things, it really, it's more like a modesty panel than anything else. You know, it's like the little gown that they put on you before they take the X-ray.
Josh inquires, what can us home users with pfSense firewalls or similar border devices with enhanced features do to enforce DNS security for all devices?
So block all the protocols outside of your network except for allow your internal recursives to access the world if that's what you want, or access the world through an upstream, whether it's one that you run that talks to the world, or someone else if you want to trust, you know, Quad9 as an example, and some people do. And, you know, one of the great things that Quad9 does, I think, for the average user is that they have a malware block list, and they will return an NX domain for any known bad, you know, command and control network and so forth. And it's the sort of thing that I like to put on, say, a parent's PC that you know, gives you that little bit of extra protection. You know, yes, they're getting some data out of you, but yeah, in terms of other features in pfSense, I don't know what they've got.
So maybe I guess we can take some comfort in that Google and Cloudflare especially have chosen, and I actually do unfortunately lump Umbrella because Cisco bought them.
Yeah.
And Cisco's inherently evil, so you can't trust them either. So
Cisco has an excellent track record of ruining every acquisition
and also doing evil things with me. So because that Linksys worked out so well for them. And so take some comfort in that you can, with those ones, because they're actually doing the right thing and using Anycast, they have a fixed set of IP addresses that you can definitely block, and it isn't going to go to a Cloudflare thing or a Google thing, so you can block those. Yes. So that's what you can definitely do. NextDNS is a bit more insidious because it is a broad range of IP things, and I think they do load balancing across those things. So again, I'll provide IP addresses for folks if you want to block NextDNS. For what it's worth, I actually trust Quad9. I'm not going to go into why right now, but I actually trust Quad9, and the malware thing does actually work. So if you want to let one through, that's not a bad one to let through. But the problem is, and actually one thing that Jim didn't cover, which is a whole other topic, is that the increasing use of malware using especially DoH because it gets through firewalls.
Yeah.
It is terrible. It's actually really terrible. And they're getting legitimate certificates from that awesome Let's Encrypt that hasn't ruined everything. So basically you have to be careful. So pfSense without any kind of extra tooling isn't going to be able to tell you that alternative destination DoH queries are being made. So you might need to do some data science on that to make that work.
Right. You obviously, if you have a next gen firewall and it will do HTTPS inspection by putting in your own certificate on the client, you know, that is a way you can, you know, man in the middle everyone on your corporate network. And there are plenty of environments where that is absolutely the norm. But Bob's having palpitations.
Well, if you want to reduce your 10 gig to 10 gig internet connection to 2, definitely enable that. And if you want to make your InfoSec board the reason your company had a massive breach, go for it. So yeah, definitely do that.
There are definitely challenges. The other thing I should mention and didn't talk about in the talk is Pi-hole as a DNS server. And if you're not familiar with Pi-hole, it's an ad blocking DNS specifically built to block advertising. And it's great. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi, but you don't have to run it on a Raspberry Pi. It'll run on pretty much any Linux. Super easy to set up, very effective. I typically see about 20% of all DNS queries being blocked by Pi-hole. So all the well-known advertising servers and targeted advertising and tracking, it just blocks those at the DNS layer, so your clients don't even see it. Except yeah, there's a few that.
Well, so there's
the block list has to be updated.
Well, it's not just that though. So there's a whole new thing going on now where the advertisers are forcing C names to be put on legitimate owned domains by the corporation, and it's not working. And it doesn't actually block the ones where the URL is really required. So you still have to run uBlock. It doesn't alleviate the need to run uBlock, but it does provide a lot of inherent protection.
If you're really concerned about privacy, the combination of everything that I've told you, plus Raspberry Pi, Pi-hole ad blocking, plus some client level blocking with uBlock Origin or other privacy protection in the browser, or run Brave and do all these things. Basically you have to do everything to have maybe 50% effectiveness at blocking ads.
I don't see ads. I mean, I don't see ads. So yeah, it is totally possible to do stuff without seeing ads.
Yeah. And you've spent how many hours?
Enough.
Yes.
For all 3 sites that I go to, our studio, and Feedly, that's it.
All right. Do we have other questions?
I'm judging by the silence that you may have explained everything so very well.
Oh, I don't think we've explained everything. I think we've just exhausted everyone's brain.
John's right. Are there any other queries? You should have said queries.
Queries. Yes, some queries.
Come on. I'm way ahead of you.
Any other questions tonight, folks? We have some great people here on the webinar today, so please feel free.
And, you know, and if
I got to say,
Yes.
Jim recommended Pi-hole a month or so ago, and it does make pretty graphs. And I know you all like pretty graphs, so you got to at least play with Pi-hole at home and see the pretty graphs, because who doesn't like that? And blocking ads.
Yes.
Sounds like a win-win to me.
So, you know, I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff. I am really just, I mean, I have some decades of experience, but again, this is not my everyday. This is just stuff I think about and play with sometimes. Again, I highly recommend if this is a topic of interest to you, go find Paul Vixie's talks, go find Bert Hubert's talks, watch them and read. And there's a lot more coming down the pike. We basically have an arms race going on around privacy and security. And, you know, there's so much money at stake that it's hard to see where this is all going to end. I don't think it's ever going to end.
Well, coronavirus, but
Well, giant meteor 2020.
Yeah.
Here's hoping, right?
So if there's no other questions, I guess we'll turn it back over to Ben.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jem. Thanks, everyone. This was really great having you tonight. Super honored with your presence, obviously. So just a couple of pieces of business that we're just going to get over with. Brandon says, thank you. That was really informative. I agree. I'm going to go ahead and do our little raffle, and then I'm going to plug our event for next time. Now, so I put everybody who joined today into a big spinning wheel in a web browser. So we had 70 people sign up for this, so we might have to spin a few times because we only had like 38 that stuck with us the whole time. So hold on one second. I'm going to share my screen. So that way, you know, there's no funny business. Well, I can't really verify that for sure, but can you see the wheel?
Oh, wow.
Are we ready? All right. Okay.
Color wheel.
that's awesome.
Anybody
That
who
is
has
awesome.
dyslexia,
That is
SATs can have trouble with this one.
Trigger warning?
Yeah, really.
We've got Joe. Joe, are you here with us? Please speak up.
Ah, excellent.
Joe, you are the proud winner of a Proxmark 3 Easy Kit. So just shoot me over. I actually have your email address. So shoot me over your address, and I will get this out to you. And one more second. I'm just gonna pull up my slides. And again, one of the things that we've always been having is like people like where do I get these awesome things that you guys give away all the time? Again, you can get them right at DC207.org if you want them. Let's see here. New share. All right. So last but not least, so we have next month, right? Second Thursday, we have a Capture the Flag. If you've been to a DC207 Capture the Flag in the past, they haven't always been perfect, but our last one went really well. We started putting all of our resources up in AWS, and that's been really helpful in making them more accessible to folks, and we're going to continue that moving forward. Seeing that the coronavirus may actually impact our the visitor policy at our location, we may choose to do this online. And maybe we'll make it like a week-long event so you can get together with folks. The one thing I did want to let folks know is that we are going to make this super beginner-friendly. There's actually going to be 2 tiers. There's going to be folks who don't know much, and then there's folks who know a little bit more. So tell your mother, brother, father, sister, lover, best friend forever, whomever, come play DC207's Capture the Flag. It's going to be super fun. You can sign up today on events.dc207.org. And just a quick plug for mainsec.org. Ben Mason, who's here with us tonight, he set up this little Slack group that connects all the subgroups in Maine that do security and IT stuff. So if you're not on there, I really encourage you to sign up because it is super, super cool. And it's really great to meet folks like Jem. I didn't even know Jem until he joined us on MainSec. So it's really, really cool. So all you got to do, go over to mainsec.org and it will be a Slack sign up page. So you'll be good to go. That's all I have, folks. We're going to do a virtual happy hour. I was going to play a game or something, but I really couldn't figure out what to do. So with such little notice, but
Hey, Ben.
yeah.
There's some confusion as to April 9th versus April 10th. Can you confirm Eventbrite page says April 9th?
Oh God. It is April 9th. I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Thank you.
I fixed it. Thank you very much.
Thank Brandon
That's
for
TFY.
pointing that out.
Thank you, Brandon. Sorry, I just put this together really quick right before some of you guys may know that I've been attending Wild West Hacking Fest virtually today. So I feel like I'm getting a double dose of virtual conferences. And they canceled theirs last minute too. They're doing a really good job though. So we're gonna have virtual happy hour in MainSec. We'll just kind of chat and talk. If you have more questions, please feel free to bring them, no matter what they are. I'd like to thank again our guests. Have a great night and have a great month. I'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.